Mike McCarthy, that's a big story right now. Jerry was very confusing after the game. No one knows what the Cowboys are going to do. I just read the Schefter report a little over an hour ago, 90 minutes ago, that the Bears have reached out to try to get permission to interview him. The contract expires anyway next week. What does your gut tell you right now? Is McCarthy back with the Cowboys for 2025?
Well, I think first, I think that's smart of the Bears. I think you put it out there for McCarthy to know. You put it out there for all of us to know. You put it out there for Jerry to know that this is day one. You're allowed to make these calls and these requests. And I think making it known instead of the entire league sitting on their hands and waiting for Jerry, I think that was a smart move by Chicago. And so what do I think ends up happening? I think there needs to be an evaluation from Mike McCarthy about whether the Cowboys are right for him as equal as the Cowboys are saying, is Mike McCarthy right for us? Because all Jerry has done is sent Irish guilt his way and been like, whoa, I don't know. But like, you haven't given him a contract extension. You haven't given him any sort of sense that he should be returning. We know the way that they went into the season. And these are all points that I would say Mike should be looking at it. They knew blatant holes that they had coming into this year. They knew running back was an issue. They knew certain other spots on the roster were issues, and they weren't fixed. And then in the middle of the season, you see them make, in what multiple executives have told me was clear cut, far and away the worst trade that was made at the deadline in Jonathan Mingo. Like, so where is this headed for you in Dallas? And if you have a clean out, is there a spot that's better for you? I wouldn't be surprised if Mike McCarthy's going, maybe there's a spot that is better for me. There's a lot that needs to be sorted out between him and the rest of his staff as well, if things are going to continue there. But I do think they have been happy with what Mike's done over the last several weeks, and I think it's universal around the league that he is a really good football coach.
And I also think a thought right now, a lot of people believe that Vrabel is going to go to the Patriots. So let's assume that happens. I know you've talked about it. I've talked about it. I really do believe Ben Johnson's going to the Jaguars. Now, we all know the Bears would love to get Ben Johnson. If Vrabel and Ben Johnson are off the board, where does Chicago go? Or are you hearing otherwise with Ben Johnson now?
Well, what I wanted to mention was my pick for Ben Johnson was also Jacksonville. If you speak to people in Detroit that know how he's wired, that would be the market that would probably fit him best. He's definitely a close the door, tinker, mad scientist, behind the scenes, unbelievable designer and scheme creator and play caller, where you got like 6 people covering you down in Jacksonville. Like, this might be the best fit for Ben, and you have a quarterback in place. You have no cultural issues inside that locker room, to my understanding at all, that you would have to work out as being a first-time head coach, right? Which is one of the things that sometimes first-time head coaches have to struggle with on top of everything else they have to do. It checked a lot of boxes. The reason I wanted to bring it up is speaking to a number of people this weekend and then this afternoon, the perception of the Jaguars' job has changed dramatically with Trent Baalke being retained. That was assumed this weekend with a number of people I asked as the best job available if both general manager and head coach were available. Because then Ben Johnson can also come in and bring the GM that he desires, or whoever comes in brings in the GM that they desire, and they work, copacetic, and it's wonderful. I think that job now, the perception of it in Jacksonville has changed with Trent Baalke being retained. And if you watch that press conference, the vast majority of the questions were about why is Trent Baalke still here, to Shad Khan and to Trent himself. And so I do think that job has landed a little bit differently now in a lot of people's eyes. And where does Chicago go now? I do get the sense, and I have heard this like from plenty, that they want kind of like a leader of men type of character. Is that a Brian Flores? Is that a Mike Vrabel? But he's most likely off the board. I think those traits are extremely important because, yes, developing Caleb Williams is a massive, massive part of this evaluation process. To my understanding, there are massive cultural issues specifically on that offensive side of the ball in that locker room. And I don't think the Bears search committee is discrediting that importance in their search at all.
So whether we want to put Ben Johnson in there or not, and he's a possibility, like if you had to say 3 names right now, just as this gets started to monitor for the Bears job with all that what you just said, who would those 3 names be that you also think are realistic?
Yeah, and Ben is realistic because I would say he's not going to take a lot of interviews. And so he's very selective in what he wants to do. To break him down really quickly, I would say if you look at it, there's so many common opponents between Chicago and Detroit. He probably saw plenty of film of Caleb Williams to go, I can work with this. If he didn't, I would assume he wouldn't take the interview, right? Like, and all that film carries over for him from what he's watching. So I would say Ben's on that list. I would say, Flores, they definitely have the ability to look at some things, but he's a complicated candidate for sure. I don't know, like they got a wide net, and they're going to go really. I mean, they're going to look at a lot of people for sure. I don't know if Pete Carroll's realistic, but experience is going to be a big thing for them. I think a really big thing for them. They don't want to my understanding, have some of those issues that happen with first-year head coaches. They'd like to avoid some of those growing pains. And so experienced guys, I think, would be on that list, maybe a little bit higher right now in the early portion of the process.
James Palmer here with us. What about the Raiders? No official word yet on Antonio Pierce. They let him do the press conference. I know Eberflus did the press conference, then got fired. What happens with Antonio Pierce?
Yeah. First off, which starter jacket did you have, Zach, of that group with the quarter zip? Sorry, Manning brothers, and your quarter zips on Monday Night Football. That's the OG quarter zip. That starter jacket with the big front pocket that he was rocking. I had a Phoenix Suns one because Barkley left the Sixers and went to the Suns. So I had a Suns one and a Blackhawks one. I don't know if you had one or not.
I actually got sent a nice starter's jacket from the folks at Crown Royal recently, which was very nice.
Crown Royal starter jacket.
Yeah.
That's on par with when I was in middle school, like the Charlotte Hornets jacket that everybody had. That was a big deal. Listen, I don't think you have him go out there and now you have all this time pass after this and you end up moving on. I am curious about the relationship in the building and the relationship between Telesco and AP, how that is. I think there's some division in that building. Can they work some of these things out? I do think the back end of the season, when you started hearing things like Mark Davis was sitting in on some coaches meetings. He was having conversations with AP about the future. I don't think you have all those conversations and do all that stuff. And Mark was pleased with the way they played over the last couple of weeks, even though they're not a very good team and have a very good roster. Like, pleased with the way they played, with the way AP was getting stuff out of them. And I don't think you do some of those things if you're sure you're going to fire a guy. So I don't think, right now, the way it looks, I don't know how you move on from him now. I mean, like, that's almost like, well, it is the Raiders, but I don't think you would do that right now. And there were some things that, talking to people there, it was AP just has to learn X, Y, and Z. It's similar to Gerard Mayo. The former player comes in, and sometimes the former player, the former captain in you, comes in through the media, whether it's business decisions or we're playing soft. Some of that stuff he's learning on the fly. And I think if he stays, that would tell you that he's learned enough in their eyes. And obviously the Brady role in that building is something that complicates matters in a lot of people's minds about what they would do moving forward. That's why Vrabel's name was obviously linked there quite a bit because of his relationship with Tom. But I don't know how much time Tom can give right now. So I think where it's at is where it's at. I think he made the right move at OC. When you pull certain levers and they work, I think it's really in your favor. Same thing for like McDermott last year when he changed OCs.
Wrap it up with James Palmer. When you take a glance at New England, everyone thinks, right, it's going to be Vrabel. Is there any chance it's not Mike Vrabel in your opinion?
Right now, I don't think there's any chance it's not him. But I do think they're going to go through their first head coaching search, real search, because Mayo wasn't one, real search in over 25 years, and it would behoove you to really analyze all of these different candidates. And there might be somebody, who knows, that ends up wowing them beyond belief. Maybe you can't come to a contract with Vrabel. I'm just throwing different things out there that could happen. They have to look at everybody. They certainly do. And I know that they will in this search, which they haven't done in the past, because it is, like I mentioned, the Jaguars' job having a different perception. I think the perception of New England is very good right now. Like, a ton of money. You have a quarterback in place. Now, I would say the league, not every candidate is sold on Drake May. I would say it's almost 50-50 about candidates that think he can play and candidates that are not sold. And so it's not a slam dunk at the quarterback spot that you have the quarterback in play, maybe like everybody says it is. But there's a lot to like, and you would assume, which is in your favor if you're a candidate. Oftentimes when the ownership shows no patience, The following guy gets added patience because you don't do it back to back. So to me, I'd be like, I'm coming in after the one and done guy. Like, I get a little bit more patience. But I do think it really just is squaring up to see that it's, you take a look at everything, but it looks like it's Mike's job. And he's the best candidate on the market right now. And I don't think it's honestly really all that close.
Last thing I'll ask you, a two-part question here. It has to do with quarterbacks, and then we'll let you run, James Palmer. Appreciate you making some time for us on what's a very busy day for you. Aaron Rodgers, what happens with him? And then Sam Darnold after what we saw last night. I know he can still redeem himself in the postseason, but do the Vikings let him go elsewhere this offseason?
Yeah, I'll start with Aaron, but I will say this really quickly. If anybody heard Sean Payton today, he's asked about Vance Joseph, his defensive coordinator, getting some looks, and I know VJ wants another job, but he brought up Aaron Glenn on his own, talking about Sam Darnold, and he goes, Aaron Glenn doesn't need to say anything to any owner or any general manager. His resume on his head coaching opportunity was 3 hours against Sam Darnold and that Vikings offense.
Hello, Jets and Saints is what I'll be saying after that game, right?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's very accurate for sure. And so with Aaron, I think there's a couple things at play. One, the way he played in the last week of the season, I think plays a factor in him going, I think I can still play. I know he's going to evaluate all of this. The lack of quarterbacks in the draft that are coming out, the lack of quality free agent quarterbacks, who's to say a place like Cleveland doesn't take a flyer as a gap start for Aaron Rodgers? Or Pittsburgh, or I think Russ goes back to Pittsburgh, but I'm just throwing different teams out there because Aaron has shown us that at this point in his life and his career, asking for every dollar is not what he's going to do. Like, he wants to go play. I don't think it's like, I don't think he really cares if he plays another year, what it's for compensation wise. So I could see somebody taking a chance on him, just going, what if it works out? What if another year removed from the Achilles, he's just a little bit better, and we saw some flashes in the back end of the season. Why couldn't we use him as a bridge? So I do think if he decides to play, there's a market. I guess that's the point. He has to decide to play. That's the first part. And then with Sam, I talked to another GM and just asked him about this past weekend, and he was just like, you got to sign him. Like, you franchise tag him, that's almost an insult considering the way the locker room loves him and the locker room has been receptive to him. I think you almost have to sign him. There's no, like, you've got a big enough sample size of success. Now, this was before Sunday night, but you have a big enough sample size of success. And the other part that I think plays into it is Sam's just 27. And the other part that I don't think anybody's talking about is JJ McCarthy's just 21 years old right now. Like, the guy who's behind him is not like Michael Penix's age. He's not Bo Nix's age. He's not up there where you're going, well, are we wasting this away? I mean, they're both relatively young. I think that plays in their favor. I don't see Sam going anywhere. I don't see them letting him go anywhere. And I do think this is a little card in the back pocket of KOC, knowing that his contract is up for negotiation this offseason as well, to where he has probably a little more leverage to do what he wants at the quarterback spot.
You can check him out, Bleacher Report, also Underdog Fantasy. He is James Palmer. Follow him on Twitter at James Palmer TV. James, appreciate it.
Appreciate it, buddy. Go Bucks.